Welcome to Spark Homeschool Parent and our Facebook Live today. We are specifically talking to those parents who are thinking about educating their children at home, but just haven't committed, haven't made that first step that they need to do in their mind, I guess, to educate their children at home. Those of you who have already started on the journey, you're going to find some wisdom from my conversation also. So thank you for joining me. Are you still thinking about educating your children at home, but you're afraid to take that first step? It seems like a really big step. We're going to be talking about that. Excuse me. Do you question whether you have what it takes to educate your children well? You're going to enjoy today's conversation. We're going to be talking about the encouragement you need. We're going to be passing on that encouragement you need to take the first step. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for to get started, to make that decision to educate your children at home? My name is Diana Rolston. I want to welcome you to Spark Homeschool Parent. Each week, we openly discuss some of the fears, some of the doubts, the questions about educating your children at home. So welcome. Today, this conversation is for you if you're not sure what it takes to educate your children well. You're going to enjoy the conversation if you're just still thinking that there are these myths about educating your children at home that are holding you back from getting started. We're going to uncover just one of those myths, but we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about what it means to homeschool. That's a big word. It's more than just educating your children at home. So we're going to be talking about that. There are so many benefits to educating your children at home. So what are you waiting for? I know it feels scary. It feels scary for all of us who have done it. Myself and my guest have been in your spot. You may feel like you're all alone, but you're not. And when you hear from others who have traveled this path before you, I just hope that you are encouraged just to commit to educating your children at home. I have the pleasure today of introducing a guest who is married and has 10 children. She has been homeschooling for more than 35 years. That's a long time. She's passionate for the Word of God, and she is passionate for her family, which shines through in everything that she does. You'll get a better sense of that during our conversation. She somehow finds time to write, to speak, and has written a few books. She has written the Stress-Free Homeschooling book. She's also just recently put out a children's book, Daniel's Dilemma. There's another one in the works that we'll have the opportunity to talk about also. Welcome, Robin Gilman. Let me just, there you are. It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I don't often have guests coming on a second time, but you have lots to share with homeschoolers. So I'm really excited that you're here with us again today. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You started educating your children at home many years ago. I said over 35 years ago.
Yeah.
I think that your youngest just graduated. Is that right?
He did. Yeah. So I have been doing this for 36 years, and now I'm officially done.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And that's 10 children that you've educated at home. So that's a big feat. So it was a long time ago that you made that decision to start educating your children at home. Maybe you could share with us what prompted you to consider this option and the inspiration behind that decision.
Well, way back then, my husband was traveling home from work and he was listening to a Focus on the Family episode. And they had Dr. Raymond Moore on, and he was talking about homeschooling. So my husband came in the door, told me about it. And I'd never heard about it. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, I like school. Like, why? Again, that was way back then when school was more straightforward than I think it's become, with focusing on education, like academic education, whereas now I feel like there's a lot of values being taught.
In the school system, you
In the
mean?
school system today,
Yeah.
there's like an incredible amount of sort of like non-academic things being taught, just like social constructs and what have you. And anyways, that was way back in the day. And then I found out that a couple of my friends actually were also planning to homeschool, and someone lent me a book, and it was by Dr. Raymond Moore. And each chapter was just a little case study of an introduction to a different kind of family that homeschooled. And they came from all walks of life. There was a single mom in there, very educated lawyer, doctor, or just, high school graduate, plumber, like all sorts. And basically, when I read it, it just told me, like, this is these people and this is how they do it and whatever. And by the end of the book, I just thought, okay, like if you love your child and can read, you can homeschool. And that was it. And I began. I think our motivation was that our main goal in life, like the thing we wanted the most for our children, was that they would love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love their neighbors themselves. And we thought we could accomplish that better than the public school and even private schools. Although I guess money would have been another, prohibitive thing as well. And so that was our motivation. People have different motivations. I've met so many on the way. They just want to give their kids a better education. A friend of mine was motivated because her daughter had taught herself to read, basically, and she thought she'd be bored in school. I mean, I'm sure there's as many reasons as there are people, but that was our reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I can confirm that. The more people I talk to, the more reasons I hear why people originally start bringing their children at home or educating their children at home. I wanted to go back to something that I think is really important, and I think it is worth repeating that you said, and you've told me that it's in your book. What are the two things that you said? If you can.
Well, there's a slight difference. Okay, so I'll talk about the two. After reading the book, I thought if you can read and you love your child, you can educate them. And that's because if you can read, you can learn anything that you need to know. So when my daughter said, "But mommy, where does the food go after it's in your mouth?" I thought, I'm so non-scientific. I'm like, okay, let's look it up. And we looked at a book that talked about digestion. And so you don't have to know it all. I've learned way more educating my children than I did in my own education, actually, because I care and I'm interested.
Yes.
But like the other thing is sort of what a child needs to be successful, like so that your education experience could help them flourish in whatever field they want to flourish in, is that you need to teach them to read and to think. And if they can read and think, they can learn anything. And they're actually way ahead of most university students. And I've heard that from many sources. One of them is a university professor who told my son years ago that the students coming through from the public high schools could decode, so they can read the words, what they are, but they couldn't interact with them. And I've heard recently, again, from another university professor, a different one, that they're kind of practically functionally illiterate now. They're not reading books and they're not interacting and they can't really think. So it's just like maybe repeating what you're told, but they can't interact with it. And if your child can read and think, let me tell you, my son's heading off to Cambridge for a PhD right now. I can tell you the different things my children have succeeded. And I don't feel that I gave them this amazing homeschool education. I gave them the basics and what they need, but it's not as daunting as one thinks.
Yes. I think that's worthy of another conversation, is some of the things that our children are able to do when they complete their education at home, because there are so many myths, so many fears about educating our children at home. And one of them is that our children can't further their education when they are educated at home. But that absolutely is not true. And we have lots of examples for that, but that's another conversation. There's also another myth that I think a lot of parents believe, And I don't know who pushes it, but probably the public school system and education in general, is that only certified teachers can educate. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Okay, well, I was asked that first off, when my child was not yet 5, but we were planning to homeschool. And I would tell that to people. And of course, people hadn't heard of it anywhere nearly as much as they have today. And there are a lot less people doing it. And the question got, oh, are you a teacher? Are you a certified teacher? And I innocently say, oh no, like I can read and I love my child, but I also, my daughter, who never went to an institutional school a day in her life, ended up being a teacher at a missions base in Haiti. And she found that the only of the teachers there, the only one who was struggling was one who had been through teachers college and was an actual certified teacher, because the other ones, I guess you learn like this is the way, but in that different culture, different setting, it just didn't work like that. And so the others were able to be creative and just to interact with like, okay, this is our situation and how do we come at it? Which is as a mom, when you're teaching your children, you might have a curriculum and you're teaching it and a child's not getting a certain concept, and so you're able to sort of step back and be creative. And it's just one child, it's not 30. So you can have the time to sort of explore what works for them. It can be so tailored to your children's needs. But yeah, I've learned along with my kids the things that I'm not strong in. Obviously, my strengths I've passed on. And there's a whole community, there's a whole community where other homeschool parents or even not homeschool parents. I know when my kids went into like the higher high school, science and math, which is not my thing. I'm like literature and history. And they availed themselves of a neighbor, that was his forte. And anytime they hit a road bump, they'd go to him for help. So we don't have to know it all. The teachers in school don't know it all. Your doctors don't know it all. Sometimes they go and look in their book. You know what I mean? Like we can read and think, so we can discover and find out and have resources. So.
Yeah. And like you said previously, when we teach our children how to think and read, then they can research. They have their own internal motivation to learn these things that they just are so passionate about. Mm-hmm. You witnessed that. So like, it's not like dumping the information from our head into their head, because my children know so much more in certain areas than I will ever know, because I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But they absolutely are.
Yeah. There many years ago, we weren't very politically interested or aware or whatever. I mean, we voted, that was about it. But I remember one time my certain son was just like, I don't know how he got into this certain politician, and he was saying, "Mom, are you going to vote for this guy?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And he goes, "Okay, well, come with me. Like, watch his speeches." And like, he knew so much, and he actually ended up working for politicians later in life, here in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he had the interest, the passion. He found out all about it. He told me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you're a little bit more political now, but we won't get into that.
Very much so,
so now, as a veteran homeschooler, that kind of leads well into my next question. What do you think it means to homeschool?
Well,
I know that's a huge question.
Yeah. Well, I think it's you look at it as like a lifelong education. Like we're all learning, right? And so I have in my book, Stress-Free Homeschooling, a whole chapter called Life Learning. Mm-hmm. And I talk in there about how much our children learn in the course of life. And it's really comforting if you're starting off with young children to know that even back in the day before school was filled with all these values teaching, there was still so much that they were sort of officially learning academically that they didn't have to. In that way, they could learn through life. Like I remember looking at curriculum for grade 1 and, who are the people in our neighborhood kind of thing, and talking about different workers. Well, you see that in life, right? And you encounter that as you go about living. My favorite story on that is my high school daughter, who was waiting for a ballet class with her other, but our fellow students. They're in the waiting room for the next class to finish and other class so they could go in. And one of them was doing their homework and had a book. And my daughter saw it was called Social Studies. Well, we never said this is social studies and had a course called social studies. We did history, we did geography, we did current events, whatever. But like, she didn't know what that word meant. So she said, "Oh, can I see your book?" And the girl handed it over and she flipped through it and said, "Oh, thank you," as she handed it back. But in her head, she was thinking, "Oh, you call that social studies. I call that supper." Because she felt she knew everything that she'd seen in the book from dinner time conversations. So, that's my like prime example of how much she learned. I have another daughter who liked reading, I think it's called Dear Canada. They're like historical fictions for girls and like kind of people's fictional characters' diaries. Anyway, when I was teaching history and I referenced something, she goes, "Oh, I know about that." And she told me so much more than I knew. And that was from reading this historical fiction. So I'm just saying that the learning is happening all the time. And of course, you want to make sure that, they are learning to read and learning, arithmetic and math and whatever as they go on. Like there's some key things that you want to make sure are covered, just basic things. But even then, they're not all covered in school anymore. Years ago, I was sitting with another mom watching our kids in their swimming lessons. It was summertime, and she mentioned how she was teaching her child the multiplication tables because they didn't learn it in school anymore. And I was just like, what? That's such a part of life, and it's learned. Like you use it every day. You don't even realize, knowing like that, whatever, 4 times 5 got these rows and it's 20 and whatever. Like I was surprised. So yeah, they're not learning as much as they used to in school, things that I feel are basic. I think that people don't know history, and that explains a lot of what's going on in the world. It's like, wait. If you know history, you know that this, don't do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So homeschooling really is a way of life, you found for yourself. I think that's an important thing for new parents to realize too. It's interacting with their children. It's teaching them always, as parents do in day-to-day conversations and outings.
And can I just interrupt to say that that's one of the things that people like think, oh, teaching is so daunting, but you as a parent, you teach all the time. You're teaching your kids please and thank you. You're teaching them look both ways before you cross the street. You're teaching them, I was going to say tie your shoes. Well, there's Velcro, but you know what I mean? Like you're constantly teaching them. You don't even notice that. And like when you start homeschooling, it's just a continuation of that. It's just what you're already doing and you just continue doing it.
That makes me think, yes, absolutely. When you start homeschooling your children when they're young, a little bit more difficult when you're pulling your children out, which neither of us experienced. Well, my eldest went finished grade 2, but that was still early in his education. But I can imagine that it is more difficult, absolutely, when parents pull their children out of school.
And I would encourage you, if you're pulling your children out of school, to write down, like just look at all the positives, write down all the positives and sell that to your child in that way. Some children want to be homeschooled. I know children who have begged their parents to homeschool them for different situations and, certain things in school that cause them stress. And I know one friend who pulled her children out. They're like in middle school, I believe. And there were 2 girls and a boy, and she thought she'd have the most trouble with her son, who was the class clown and just like seemed to be flourishing. It turned out, was so relieved because somehow he'd become the class clown and it was expected. And he was just like trying to always keep up this funny persona. And he was just able to be himself and he was actually relieved. But there are so many positives about homeschooling. Some people pull them out because there's negatives. There's negatives in school. There's bullying, the amount of stories I hear, and so many other stresses. Maybe they're teaching values that are not yours, and that's a stress to your child because they're conflicted. So there's negative reasons in school to pull your kids out. But, and I mean, obviously, if your child's being bullied and you're pulling them out, like, they could be happy that that's not going to be an issue. But I would just say really focus on the positives. There's so many positive reasons for homeschooling, and you know, to encourage yourself, to encourage your child.
I just wanted to mention a couple things. There is no perfect time. It's never going to be a perfect time to start homeschooling. So this is, just do it. You will always, as a parent, have questions. You will always have fears that keep coming up. Even though you know it's the right decision and things may be going well, there's always, you can attest to that too. It's not always wonderful. There's always going to be questions. So if you have questions and that's what's holding you back, that's not a good excuse anymore. And the unknowns, like there's always, there's unknowns. It's a part of life. So we're encouraging you, Robin's encouraging you, just take that first step. I just wanted to ask you, Robin, it's not easy homeschooling. It's not easy making that decision to homeschool. Did you really know what you were doing when you first started educating your children at home?
No, but I might have thought I did more than I did. Because I started when they were young. It was pretty simple. I was just teaching my little one, the letter sounds and like, numbers. So that was pretty simple. Yeah, and I am a pretty chill person. So I just kind of had this, this is what I'm doing and this is why, and it's good. Now along the way, like I have 10 kids. They're not all easy peasy, some of them were challenges, real challenges to raise. And I remember with one particular one who was just so, stubborn. And I thought, should I put this one in school? Even though I'm a committed homeschooler, it's like, if this is what's best for this one, like, should I put this one in school? And I realized that all it would do in her case would be to take out that conflict from, 9 to 3, but she'd come home and would be, so I concluded it wasn't, the best thing for her. We kept her home and we kept just plodding away. And then, eventually it took a long time before she sort of got over that, constant clashing. And so, yeah, we had some hard times. She's thanked me as an adult. She has thanked me and thanked me, and I know with a son I was having trouble with, and my husband, fix it. The guys that just want to fix it. It's like, okay, we're putting him in school, and I'm like, no, It's not what I'm saying. I'm just like, I'm struggling, but that's not the answer, whatever. And so, yeah, it's not all skipping through fields of daisies and sunshine and blue skies. But neither is any job or career that you're going to do, right? Like they all have challenging times, different things come in. But the fruit, of it all, the relationship that I have with my kids and that they have with each other, are really close. They're really for each other and for us. And they've done well as adults. I haven't ruined them, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Very, very worthwhile. And maybe we could just speak for a second about socialization, because that's always, like, what about socialization? Oh. And I want to say, one, if you're not a hermit living in some out of the place where there's no people, your kids are going to be socialized. A certain doctor I read said that kids are best socialized by, parents and other good adults in their lives, because they're not learning to be, they're learning, they're trying, you want them to learn kind of up. I don't know how to put that better. There's a verse in the Bible that says the companion of fools, suffers harm, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But also, like, if they go to Sunday school, if they go to, sports things, my kids were in swimming lessons and all, dance classes and whatever, like, they're going to be with other kids and they're going to learn, how to interact. So that's not, and, if this year turns out like the last couple of years, your kids are going to be, if they were in school, they'll be on Zoom anyway. And this way, depending on your level of comfort, they can get together with other kids that are homeschooling that, aren't fearful of monkeypox, whatever else.
Whatever the next thing is.
Whatever. I'm just saying, like, you have that control, and not just that, you have the control to, not have them be out in the schoolyard with a bully, but like you can pick and choose. And I know at one point we were friends with a certain family, and they were picking up some bad habits from that kid's, certain child's behavior. Not that my kids were all perfect, but they didn't need anyone, someone else's stuff besides what we were dealing with. Then we just kind of, pulled back a bit for a while, and then like, you just have that control to, who you're getting together with and when, and there's lots of good socialization that happens. That's not a thing to worry about.
Yeah. One thing also that I've heard about children that are educated at home is they socialize well and interact well with adults, which
Absolutely.
And not just children that are in the same age, the same grade, but that's a huge benefit for our children also. So many benefits.
Yeah, when I have interacted with a teen who like doesn't look me in the eye and is kind of like I kind of think to myself, oh, they weren't homeschooled. Like that's how it goes, like they don't know how to interact with me. Not that every homeschooler, is perfectly whatever, or every but homeschooling schoolers in general. Someone pointed that out to me one day years ago. Actually, this young man, he was like 20, and he said, "I notice your children are comfortable talking to young and old alike." I'm like, oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's something we just take for granted because our children are interacting with all sorts of people. Yep. I want to give you the opportunity to tell us about your books.
Okay, well, I wrote Stress-Free Homeschooling. I don't know how that's,
highly recommended.
And it's, getting it all done and enjoying it. So, I talk a little about everything in it. I talk about some objections and what other people, parents, when your parents aren't on board and all kinds of things, and some very basic how-tos. And then
sorry, I'm just going to ask you, where can people get a copy of that? Because
Stress-Free Homeschooling, you can pick it up from me. I'm in Ottawa, or you can get it on Amazon. Like that's
okay.
Yeah. And then Daniel's Dilemma, is a story I wrote when my son Daniel, who's now 34 and on his way to his PhD, he was 4 and he was bored because his siblings were homeschooling and he didn't have anything else to do. And anyway, his mother finds him a really neat thing to do, and it will inspire your children maybe to be secret servants around the home doing things for others, possibly. It had that effect on my kids over the years when I read it to them. So I had written it years ago, but I just collaborated with a woman who became my daughter-in-law since we started the project and married the Daniel and Daniel's Dilemma.
Fantastic. And then you were telling me that you have another, at least one other book.
Yeah, I'm working on, I'm finished children's novel. And again, it's a homeschooling family. I was telling Diana that the homeschool demographic doesn't have a lot of books that are they're homeschooling, people in it. And it's a story of two sisters and how they discover that they're each other's best friend. That's sort of the point of that. And I'm also almost completed devotional Genesis for adults for moms. So I'm constantly writing.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I have more time now.
Yes, and you will. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. We'll keep an eye out for those as they come out, and we'll have you visit us again because you have been doing homeschooling and successfully graduated your 10th child. So congratulations on that. You have lots of wisdom to share with others. So I'm happy to be able to.
I certainly have experience, and I love encouraging other parents, other moms in this worthwhile venture. So I'm just happy to encourage anyone.
Great. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
And I just wanted to say thank you for joining us at Spark Homeschool Parent. My commitment is to provide an encouraging, non-judgmental community where we can share our questions, openly share and confess our doubts and fears about educating our children at home. If you're looking for a community of like-minded parents who believe that educating their children at home is the best choice for their family, join us at Spark Homeschool Parent Facebook group. And you have an exciting afternoon. You're going to be spending some time with your grandchildren. I'm going to be going on a date with my son. Just other examples of the benefits of educating our children at home and the great relationships that we build along the way. Thanks again for joining me.